take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice long
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube as we are so close to our quest for 5,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much for all that have subscribed in the recent weeks. Thank you all, and we're getting so close to that goal. And if you haven't already, click the link down below and look at the new draft guide. It's still version 2.0, but I'll be working on making updates and try to get as many prospects as we can before the draft. And I'll just keep on updating that link, so feel free to bookmark that wherever you want and stay tuned for more updates to that free draft guide. And yet again, thank you all so much for the support, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So now, today what we're going to be discussing is blue chip players, the hot topic that's been going around all over Twitter, all over Bears fans as well, because what does it even mean? And that's what I want to first talk about. Is I want us to break down what does it mean to be a blue chip player, and then also talk about previous year's blue chip players, and then start identifying the blue players this year. Now, why is this important? Well, a lot of experts out there are saying that the Bears are going to be trying to find those blue chip players, obviously with the first pick and with number 9. And if they can trade back and get a blue player, that might be something that they ultimately wind up doing. And just like all awesome buzzwords, I think that this is actually quite overused. And I hear a lot of people use it, and it just reminds me of this meme where it's, you keep using that word, I do not think it means what you think it means. And so that's why today I want us to discuss it, because what does it actually mean to have a blue player? Because if you hear someone say, I have 10 plus blue players, they probably don't know what the word actually means. And I don't mean that no disrespect, but that's why what I want us to do is just kind of walk through it and discuss what it means so that we can help better identify what the Bears might be looking for and if there's going to be a blue player available, because then it better understands that, hey, they're not going to be moving back or anything like that. So let's ask, what does it mean to be a blue chip player? Now, even with this, I actually don't even want to talk about the sports side of things. The term blue chip is all over the place. And actually in one of the most prominent industries, in the finance industry, in stock trading, there's a term, they use it to term blue chip stocks. And I actually want to go through that definition because I think it better helps us understand the term from a sports perspective. Because what is a blue chip stock? A blue chip stock refers to shares of well-established, financially stable companies with a long track record of consistent performance and reliable earnings. These companies are typically leaders in their respective industries, often having a substantial market capitalization, considered relatively low risk investments compared to other stocks, as they tend to weather economic downturns better and offer investors a level of stability and confidence. Investors often turn to blue chip stocks as a cornerstone of their investment portfolios, seeking steady growth and income over the long term. So some examples: Apple, Amazon, Google, Coca-Cola, Visa, Johnson & Johnson, right? You guys didn't come to be lectured about stocks or anything like that, but this is what a blue chip stock means. And I think if you just tweak a couple of those words, you go, oh, if you just replace investment portfolio with organization and they're developing cornerstones of the organization, that's what a lot of blue chip players are seen as. It's the really, really safe investments. And if you take that same definition and you just change some of the words and make it more into the sports realm of things, it's like the players who have proven themselves to be the best at the position, have proven skills rather than speculative or untapped potential. It's about going with someone with that true proven track record that is at the top, the best at what they do. And I think that's some of the key pieces, because just because someone is not a blue chip player does not mean that they're not going to be great. It just means, like a blue chip player, Adrian Peterson is someone that comes to mind, where you knew this guy has been the best running back for multiple years. You take him, he's going to be a very good player, including like a Saquon Barkley type of deal. Injuries derailed him, but you have players that just the Bosas, right? Players that are just have always been the best and have this insanely just high, they're going to hit, but also they have this super high ceiling where they can be those elite players. They're just different. I think that's the easiest way. And also, I think something that gets confusing is it doesn't mean that they're just a top 10 consensus player. Now, this is where also it gets a little interesting because just because you're a top 10 player doesn't mean that you're a blue chip player. And I think a perfect example is when we look at last year. Because if you look at the players last year, Tyree Wilson is a perfect example of this out at Texas Tech, where he was the number 6 overall prospect. And I remember on the show last year, I was saying he's not a blue chip player, even though some people were claiming he might be. And you look at this too, if you ask any draft expert, how many blue chip players were there last year? They would all say 3. It was Will Anderson, Bijan Robinson, and Jalen Carter. Why? Because Jalen Carter was the best defensive tackle for multiple years. Will Anderson was the best defensive end for multiple years. Bijan Robinson was the best running back for multiple years. They have this layer, this extra layer of they're going to be great, but they've also have this built-in track record. And then you look at like a Devon Witherspoon or a Christian Gonzalez, players that I would have an elite grade on coming out, but I wouldn't necessarily have a blue chip on them, so to speak, because I still felt like, okay, Witherspoon really did this in one season, and Christian Gonzalez, there was still a lot of questions about his overall coverage ability. And I think that's the big difference with this. And also people say, well, CJ Stroud, he's amazing now. Yet again, keyword, prospects, not what did they do in the NFL? It's what about their specific prospect? And even when you look at Bryce Young, the consensus number 1 overall player or overall prospect, but still a lot of people, a lot of experts out there wouldn't give him the blue chip tag because they go, listen, he's like 5'10", 100 pounds soaking wet. he's not the typical body type for that quarterback position. And also quarterback is very volatile and difficult to say and to kind of discuss. So I hope that kind of makes sense a little bit where when you look at how many blue chip players, if it's 4, if it's 5, that's a really good year. If it's 3, I feel like 3 is like typically the generic number of blue chip prospects that you actually have because yet again, they are the top elite, always been one of the best. And the way that I always like to think about it is usually you can tell who's a blue chip player if you look at the first mock draft, like right after the 2023 draft, right? Or right after the 2022 draft. When people did their 2023 draft, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, and Bijan Robinson were all like the top 3 players, and they continued to play like the top 3 players. So that's just some of the stuff that we need to discuss. But also with all of this, I want to discuss the outlier blue chips and some of the fringe blue chips and then the consensus blue chip prospects. And the reason why I broke it out this way is, yet again, even though that we've been discussing this, there's some variance to just the overall term of a blue chip prospect, or the Bears might see a player and go, this is the next level type of a player that is a player that we cannot miss. And I also want to say this too. This year is the hardest year I've had covering the draft and identifying blue chip talent because I just feel like there's so many really good elite players. And then it's just everyone's kind of all over the board with this. So I think this year is especially difficult and challenging to have a consensus on this. So I think that's what makes this draft also so fascinating. So let's get started with kind of these players that I think that the Bears might be doing their due diligence on, or I know they're doing their due diligence on, to say, would the Bears categorize these as a blue chip player at that number 9 pick? And I have six players out here that I kind of have as the debatable one specifically for the Bears. So yeah, I don't have the cornerback from Toledo out here, but these are 6 that I think the Bears might be debating. And I think one of the more interesting ones is Olu Fashanu, the offensive tackle out of Penn State. This guy was seen as a blue chip player. And that's why we saw, like, at the very beginning of the draft process, Eberflus and Ryan, blue chip player. And that's, I think, then you just start to see his draft tank, where he was like the number 2 prospect. Now he's the number 14 prospect. And we've talked about him before. It's that run blocking that people have question marks on. But he's a phenomenal athlete, an incredible pass blocker. And that's someone that the Bears are going to be doing their due diligence on to say, hey, you know what? The draft process is crazy. He's a blue chip player. We're taking him at 9. Because when you take that blue chip player, it's not if they're going to be good. It's they are going to be good. Because if you look at Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, Bijan Robinson, all of them made substantial impacts year 1. Bijan could have had a better year if it wasn't for the Falcons not using him properly. But still, they're just that next level good. So Eberflus is one of those that I find very interesting. And another person that I find very interesting too that the Bears have been talking with is Dallas Turner. We talked about him last episode. He's got this elite first step, this elite quickness. And the Bears could see him and go, listen, I know that he might not be one of the Bosas coming out or even Will Anderson, but I think he's right below Will Anderson. That could be something that the Bears are looking at with Dallas Turner. I have a first-round grade on him. I don't think of him as elite. He's my edge 3, but I think that the edges are just phenomenal. But Dallas Turner has that upside that yet again, this is where, in my opinion, he's not a blue chip player, but the Bears could say it's not the could. He already is doing that. So that's something that I feel the Bears are definitely going to be looking at and trying to understand with Dallas Turner. And another person I just want to highlight is Johnny Newton. This guy has been one of the best defensive tackles over the past 2 years. And I think, yet again, a lot of people are sleeping on him because of his foot injury, so he's not able to do the testing. He's got incredible, insane hands. And that's why you see in certain areas, he is seen as a top prospect. But the consensus board, number 25, which I think is definitely very, very low for a considerable blue chip prospect. But Johnny Newton is phenomenally good. And some other players too. Byron Murphy II could be one of those players that the Bears say, we don't see players with this type of burst, this type of acceleration, or even like a Jackson Powers Johnson. We don't see centers at this size that can move this well, that can block this well. And then last but not least, Laiatu Latu, like when we talked about him, if you ignore the injury or if that injury is non-existent or a non-concern, this guy has been a ridiculous, like him and Will Anderson have been the best defensive ends in college football over the past couple seasons. So Will Anderson goes last year, Latu is going this year. So he could be someone that if he checks all the boxes, it's just this guy's insane. But yet again, I don't have them on as blue chip prospects for me. That's why I've seen others where Johnny Newton has been considered a blue chip player, or even like a Byron Murphy. So it's all debatable and it's all arguable from that perspective. Like I said, this year was one of the more complex pieces. And to me, these players are more in that, now people say the red category, where it's that next tier below blue. So if you do hear blue and red and other colors like that, that's what it means. Red is just one tier below blue. So let's talk about the fringe blue chips. Now, these players, I know that some will be like, what are you talking about? I just think that when you look at the overall consensus, there's still some people that debate this. Are they wrong? I honestly think so. I do think that they're a little bit wrong, but I wanted to put them as fringe blue chips just so that you kind of understand where people are at, because total, I would have 6 blue chip prospects, which is a lot. It is a really, really a lot of them. So the fringe blue chips, number 1 is Caleb Williams. And the reason why is you see a lot of people hating on Caleb Williams. He's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not that. While when Trevor Lawrence was coming out, everyone was like, yep, he's the second coming of Andrew Luck. And that's the reason why I put him in this. Yet again, I honestly think that he is more of a blue chip quarterback than anything else. And a lot of people have him as a blue chip quarterback. I just wanted to do this just for the sake of us discussing this and having this conversation that some people, as we all know, are saying, I like Jaden Daniels or I like this, which I think is just, I think that people just want to talk about something that's not just Caleb Williams being freaking awesome. But that's the reason, that's where kind of the quarterback position can be hotly debated. And the other player is Rome Odunze, which as a lot of people just rolled their eyes with that, I agree. Because Rome Odunze, I think a lot of people, it's the prospect fatigue of, well, there's already Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. So when people hear Rome Odunze, they go, you can't have three blue chip wide receivers. Where I'm now, the more that I watch Rome Odunze, I go, dude, this guy might be a blue chip. Like, this guy is really, 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 really good. So Rome to me is that person that I think a lot of people are starting to accept, as these guys are just so incredibly talented. Because you look at them, and I've heard a lot of people say over the past 10 years that 3 of the top 6 prospects are in this year's draft, or 3 of the top 6, or 3 are in the top 6 for wide receiver prospects in the last 10 years, with Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. They're just that good of prospects that are coming out of the draft. So I wanted to bring those up and just kind of bring it up in their own tier, because I wanted to discuss them separately as to others. And there was another person that is in the consensus that you could even debate should be on the other ones. But let's go into consensus blue chip players. Marvin Harrison Jr., right? There's not a world in where he's a bad player. Marvin Harrison Jr. to me is you could flag as that generational if you really want to. Brock Bowers is someone that I want to bring up because some people might debate that he should be in the fringe blue chips. I think that there's a lot of prospect fatigue on Brock Bowers. I think people forget this guy has been the best tight end in college football over the past 3 years. He has some of the best hands, and yeah, he had 22.2% contested catch percentage. Watch those grabs. Watch those catches. He wasn't going to go down with those balls. And also look at the year before, he had a better contested catch percentage than even Rome Odunze, where Brock Bowers has been that guy and has been one of the best. And that's why, to me, he is a blue chip player. We have not seen a draft prospect like this since Kyle Pitts. And even then, Brock Bowers is more of a true inline tight end and has proven it more rather than a Kyle Pitts, who was really more of a glorified wide receiver. And yet again, when you go to the Atlanta Falcons, anything can happen. So Brock Bowers, to me, is definitely a consensus blue chip player. And then you follow it up with Malik Neighbors, where Malik is just, yet again, I think people sleep on him because of Marvin Harrison Jr. Malik Neighbors is really close to Marvin Harrison Jr. And I do believe when people say he's above Marvin, that can be legitimate sentiment, because he's just an elite separator. And last but not least, Joe Alt, offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. This guy has been, with him in Fashanu was just a better athlete than Joe Alt. Joe Alt is just such a well put together offensive tackle that you get him, he's your cornerstone for the next 10 years. He's been phenomenal. Now, I don't think that he's as good of a prospect when you're comparing blue chip talent to a Penei Sewell, but I think that Joe Alt is just right there up with the greats, or with some of the best prospects that we've seen, just very all around solid talent. So I wanted to break this down, and I knew that this might be a little controversial to a lot of people too. So make sure to like. It helps out the channel, because I feel like some people, this will be debated, right? And I think, to me, this is such a weird year when it comes to blue chip talent. And that's where, too, when you look at the board, so to speak, if the Bears can walk away with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, there you have 2 blue chip players. But I will say, I've seen people say Brian Thomas, blue chip. That's not blue chip. That's a good player. That's a first round grade. And he's very athletically sound. But Rome Odunze is just another layer above him. Malik Neighbors, another level above him. That's the true blue chip talent that's out there. But let me know if you have someone that I didn't talk about, or someone that you believe that is a blue chip. Let me know down in the comments below. Also, make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a